The first thing Sadie Mercer did when the train stopped in Red Mesa was step down backward, one hand gripping the iron rail, the other holding tight to a carpet bag that looked too light for a woman who had left everything behind. The station platform groaned under boots and wagon wheels, and a cattle buyer in a clean hat said, loud enough for half the town to hear, "Lady, if you're getting off here, you're either lost or desperate." Sadie looked up at him with the kind of still face that made a man hear his own foolishness. "I've found," she said, and though her voice was soft, it carried clear through coal smoke and hoarse sweat, that desperate people usually know exactly where they're going. The buyer laughed once, then stopped when she met his eyes without blinking. Somewhere behind the depot, a loose mule kicked at a stall board. The July heat had already thickened, and dust clung to the back of Sadie's throat like old flour. She shifted the bag from one hand to the other. There was blood on the cuff of her dress, not fresh enough to shine, but not old enough to ignore. At the far end of the platform, a black gelding reared hard against a lead rope. Men jumped back. One of them cursed. The horse came down wild-eyed, foam at the bit, striking with one front hoof, while a young stable hand tried and failed to hold him. Sadie moved before anyone called for help. She set down her carpet bag, walked straight through the cloud of cinders, spoke low, too low for the men to hear. The gelding's ears flicked. He tossed once, twice, then went still enough for her to lay a hand against the hot muscle of his neck. She did not force him. She just stood there, breathing with him, until the rope slackened and the boy holding it looked as if he had seen a ghost. That was when the man in the buckskin vest stepped off the shaded porch of the freight office and watched her properly. Elias Boone was not wearing anything that announced wealth except time. Time enough to have his boots polished, his shirt stitched with care, his hat brushed clean of trail dust, and time enough to stand where men made room for him without being told. He was broad through the shoulders, sun-browned, and quiet in the way only dangerous or deeply tired men ever are. "Horse knows before people do," he said. Sadie turned. "Knows what?" "That somebody's been hurt." For the first time, her fingers tightened around the horse's mane. A whistle shrieked behind them. Steam rolled over the platform. Someone shouted for baggage. Somewhere close by, glass shattered. Red Mesa was awake all around them, but the air between Sadie Mercer and Elias Boone seemed to narrow to one question neither of them asked. Who had hurt her? Before we go further, settle in wherever you are tonight and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. We always like knowing who's with us out there. When the steam cleared, the stable boy was still staring at Sadie. "Ma'am," he whispered, "how'd you do that?" "Same way you calm frightened people," Sadie said. "Don't lie to them. Don't crowd them. And don't make their fear about your pride." Elias Boone's mouth shifted, not quite into a smile. "That advice cover men too?" "It should." A laugh passed through the onlookers, but Boone did not laugh. He was watching the blood on her cuff now. Not openly. Men like him never looked openly when something mattered. The station master came hurrying out with a ledger tucked under one arm. "Mr. Boone, telegram from Denver," he said, then noticed Sadie. "What's happened?" "Nothing you need to fret over," Boone said. "Miss Mercer here is looking for work." The cattle buyer recovered enough nerve to speak again. "Town's full up." "No," said Elias Boone. "It isn't." That moved the crowd more than if he had raised his voice. Sadie felt it. The station master felt it too. Boone took the telegram, tucked it into his vest pocket unread, and looked at her as if making a business calculation he disliked. "My housekeeper left 2 weeks ago for her daughter's confinement. My foreman's wife is trying to cover the work at the main house, and she'd rather pull her own teeth. If you can cook half as well as you handle a frightened animal, I've got a place for you until the end of summer." Sadie did not answer at once. That was her second unusual thing. Most people jumped when fortune knocked. She waited first, as if generosity itself might be a trap. "What's the catch?" she asked. A few men smirked. Boone did not. "No catch. You work. You get paid. Room above the kitchen wing. Sunday's your own. And if I say no, then I expect you know your next move better than I do." He said it without threat, without pressure, and that somehow made it harder. Sadie glanced once toward the road leading out of town. Long, white, exposed. Then she looked toward the Boone spread in the distance where the mesa cut blue against the sky. She had $3 sewn into her hem, a bruise darkening under her sleeve, and a secret that would hang her if it reached the wrong ears. "Yes," she said. "I'll work." Boone nodded once. Wagon leaves in 10 minutes. The station master cleared his throat. Mr. Boone, about that telegram. Boone unfolded it then, read it, and for the first time the control left his face. Not much. Only enough for Sadie to see that whatever was written there had weight. His jaw set. He folded the paper with slow care and put it back in his pocket. Problem? Sadie asked before she could stop herself. His eyes came to hers, dark and level. Depends whether a man can outrun his dead brother's mistakes. That was all he said. But as the wagon rolled out of Red Mesa with the smell of hot leather and dry sage rising around them, Sadie held her carpetbag on her lap and understood two things at once. She was not the only one running from the past, and whatever waited at Boone Ridge was already coming for them both. The ranch sat in high country where the evenings cooled fast and the pines smelled sharp enough to clean the lungs. The main house was bigger than Sadie expected. Money had built it. So had grief. The barn was sound, the fences repaired, the cattle watered. Everything that kept men alive had been tended. Everything that made life soft had been left alone. Marta Keene, the foreman's wife, met them at the kitchen steps with flour on her arms and suspicion in her eyes. She was thick through the middle, red-haired gone silver at the temples, and she wiped her hands on her apron even when they were already clean. "This the one?" she asked Boone. "This is Miss Mercer. She a cook?" Sadie answered for herself. "Good enough that you'll complain less after supper than you are now." Marta stared one beat too long, then barked out a laugh. "All right then. Come see what kind of war you've walked into." Inside, the kitchen held the deep comfort of heat, yeast, coffee grounds, soap, and iron pans seasoned by years of use. Sadie felt her shoulders loosen for the first time in days. A place where hands stayed busy was a place where questions sometimes waited. Sometimes. By nightfall she had turned out biscuits, stewed beef with green chiles, and blackberry cobbler. The ranch hands ate in grateful silence. Elias Boone took a second helping of cobbler, which told Sadie more than praise would have. Only later, when she carried a lamp to the small room above the kitchen wing, did she let herself unbutton her cuff. The bruise ran from wrist to elbow, hand-shaped and ugly. Across her ribs, hidden beneath her dress, was another. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed and listened to the creak of the house settling into darkness. Then she heard it. Not the wind, not the night jars. Hoofbeats. One rider. Fast. She crossed to the window and lifted the curtain just enough to see a lantern swinging in the yard below. Boone was already outside pulling on gloves. Tom Keene, the foreman, met the rider near the barn. There were too many shadows to read faces, but urgency carried even when words did not. The rider said one name clearly enough to reach her. Cal Duvall. Boone went still as carved wood. A minute later, he and Keene were saddling fresh horses. Sadie stood barefoot on cold boards with her heart beating wrong in her chest. She did not know who Cal Duvall was, but she knew the sound of men leaving in the night because danger had finally caught up. By dawn, everything had changed. Tom Keene came back alone with blood on his sleeve, and Elias Boone was bringing a 12-year-old girl across his saddle like a bundle he did not dare drop. The girl's dress was soaked through at one shoulder. Her braids had come half undone, and one small boot was missing. Boone slid from the saddle and lifted her down with both hands. "She's alive," he said before anyone asked. Marta was already clearing the kitchen table. "What happened?" Tom Keene looked toward the dark beyond the yard, as if he expected it to answer for him. "Wagon overturned in the wash north of Duvall Crossing. Driver dead. Girl was hidden under feed sacks." "Hidden by who?" Marta asked. Boone's face hardened. "By my brother's widow, I think. Before she died." Sadie did not waste time on the shock of that. The child was burning with fever and shivering at once, the strange misery of a body that had been terrified past its limits. Sadie brought hot water, clean cloths, and the last of the willow bark tea she carried in her bag. When the girl woke enough to fight, Sadie took her hand and spoke in the same low tone she had used on the black gelding. "No one's taking you tonight," she said. "Not while I'm here." The child's fingers clamped hard around hers. "He will," she whispered. "Who?" The answer came from Elias Boone. "Cal Duvall." The name sat in the kitchen like a bad smell. Even the lamp flame seemed to narrow. Boone leaned both hands on the table and looked down at the girl. "Her name is Wren. She's my niece." Tom shifted his weight, hat in both hands. "Rider who found me said Duvall's men were already searching the wash." Word is he's coming with papers. Says Jonas Boone promised him rights to the north pasture, the creek access, and guardianship of the child if certain debts weren't paid. Marta gave a rough little snort. Guardianship. As if that man ever wanted a child except to control what stands behind her. Sadie looked from one face to the next. How much land? Boone answered without lifting his eyes. Enough to break this ranch in half. It was nearly dawn before Wren slept. Sadie sat beside the bed in the small room off the kitchen while the house went about the hushed business of fear. Boots crossing the porch. Low voices in the yard. Tack buckles jingling. Men preparing for trouble without calling it trouble. When she finally stepped into the hall, Boone was waiting there, one shoulder against the wall, hat in his hands. In lamplight, he looked older than he had on the platform. Not weaker, just worn in places daylight hid. You know, children, he said. I know what frightened things need. He nodded, as if that answer fit more than the question. You should leave before noon. Sadie felt the boards steady under her feet. I just got here. That's why you can still go clean. From what? From my family's trouble. Duvall will come legal first and ugly second. Men like him enjoy both. Sadie folded her arms, then winced when the bruise under her sleeve reminded her it was there. Boone's gaze dropped. Noticed. Came back up. He said nothing about it. That kindness nearly undid her. You hired me, she said. I'm unhiring you for your own good. For my own good, she repeated, and the old bitterness crept in before she could stop it. That phrase has usually meant someone else gets to decide what I can survive. Boone straightened. Then I'll say it plain. A fight is coming. I don't know how hard. I don't know how dirty. And I don't want a woman with no kin here caught in the middle because I was too proud to send her clear. Sadie ought to have taken the chance. The road south was still open. Red Mesa had stage lines. She could be 3 towns away by sundown. She could keep running and stay alive in the thin, lonely way she had managed these last 6 months. Then she thought of Wren's hand locking around hers in the dark. No, she said. Boone's jaw tightened. Miss Mercer. No. If that child is afraid of this man, he's no guardian. And if he wants your water and your land, he won't stop at paper. Somebody should stay who can keep a frightened creature from bolting at the worst time. For the first time since dawn, something like surprise reached Boone's face. You don't owe us that. Sadie looked past him, out the back window where the first line of sunlight had struck the corral's gold. Maybe not, but I'm tired of spending my life leaving before the real trouble starts. That was the moment. The harder choice standing open like a gate, and Sadie Mercer closing it with her own hand. Boone held her eyes a long time. All right, he said quietly. But if things turn, you do exactly as I say. She almost smiled. That depends how sensible you sound when the time comes. A breath of laughter left him, so slight she might have imagined it. Marta was right. You do make a room less mournful. By midday, all of Red Mesa knew Cal Duvall was coming. Duvall held notes on ranches, bought officials the way other men bought feed, and had the kind of power that made decent people lower their voices. Sadie went with Marta to the mercantile that afternoon because fear still needed flour and lamp oil. The storekeeper, Mr. Bell, wiped the same clean place on his counter again and again while pretending not to listen. That Boone girl really up there? He asked finally. Niece, Marta said. Bell grunted. Duvall says the papers are ironclad. Paper burns, Marta replied. On the way back to the wagon, they passed the telegraph office. A notice board hung outside with freight times, church socials, and 2 wanted circulars curling at the edges. Sadie froze so abruptly the flour sack slid in her arms. One of the circulars bore the name Silas Vane. Not hers. His. Wanted for fraud, assault, and the suspected murder of a federal bookkeeper who had gone missing in Kansas City. Last seen traveling west under assumed company business. Sadie could not draw breath for a full second. Marta turned back. What is it? Sadie forced herself to step closer. The paper was recent. The ink not yet weather-blurred. Beneath the charges, one line hooked into her like wire. Wife may be traveling under maiden name. Consider her a material witness. Material witness. Not murderer. Not fugitive. Witness. Her knees nearly gave. Marta read over her shoulder, and whatever question rose in her face, she buried before it reached her mouth. Is that your husband? Sadie nodded once. Alive. I thought so. Her voice came dry and cracked. He should be dead. Marta did not gasp, and for that alone Sadie loved her a little. Should be. He beat a clerk nearly to death after the man threatened to expose him. I took the account books and ran before he could decide I knew too much. Last I heard, the boarding house he was staying in burned. Marta looked at the poster again. Then either the devil keeps poor ledgers, or somebody lied about the fire. Sadie closed her eyes. She could smell it all over again. The paraffin lamp kicked sideways, the rug catching, Silas shouting her name from the smoke while she ran barefoot into an alley with the books under one arm. Marta touched her elbow gently. Does Boone know? No. Will he take it badly? Sadie looked toward the road to Boone Ridge. I don't know yet whether he'll take it like a rich man or a good one. Marta clicked her tongue. Girl, if Elias Boone took after rich men, this county would be meaner than it is. That evening, Sadie found Boone in the lower barn rewrapping a rope around his hand until the fibers bit his skin red. Horses shifted in their stalls. Swallows nested in the rafters. The whole place smelled of hay, leather, and the sharp, clean bite of liniment. I need to tell you something, she said. Boone did not look up. Usually means it's bad. It is. He set the rope down then. She handed him the wanted circular she had taken from the board. He read it once. Then again. She waited for suspicion, for anger, for the little recoil decent men often gave women attached to ugly stories. Instead he asked, Did you kill anybody? No. Did you help him? No. Boone folded the circular. Then you're running from something, not toward it. She stared at him. That's all. That's enough for now. He rested the paper on the rail. You can tell me the rest when it stops costing you so much to stand upright while you say it. Sadie looked down because gratitude in the face of simple mercy had always felt too much like weeping. He waited, said nothing. Let the silence be kind. At last she managed. Most folks want the whole wound before they decide whether to pity it. Boone answered in that low, even way of his, pity's cheap. I'd rather know whether a person stays. That was the first quotable line, though neither of them knew it then, and it hung in the barn with the warm animal breath and the rustle of hay, solid as oak. Near sunset, a dust plume rose on the north road. 3 riders first, then a wagon, then 2 more behind. Tom Keene came up onto the porch with his rifle. He's early. Cal Duvall stepped down from the wagon dressed like the kind of man who preferred cities but enjoyed owning country people. His coat was too dark for the heat, his collar starched, his boots expensive enough to insult the yard. He wore a smile that had traveled a long way without needing truth to sustain it. Beside him climbed Sheriff Harlan Pike, narrow-faced and loose-mouthed, forever wetting his lips before speaking. Duvall removed his gloves finger by finger. Elias. Always good to see enterprise thriving. Boone remained on the porch. You should have sent a snake. It would have felt more welcome. Duvall's smile thinned, but did not break. I've come on lawful business. Regarding the late Jonas Boone's obligations and the custody of his daughter. Wren stood hidden behind Marta's skirts inside the doorway, one hand clutching Sadie's dress. Duvall saw the movement. His gaze sharpened. There she is. The child shrank back, so hard Sadie felt it through the cloth. Boone descended 1 step, not more. She stays here. Sheriff Pike cleared his throat and produced folded papers. Court recognized lien, transfer of water rights upon default, and temporary guardianship pending county review. County review in whose county? Tom Keene muttered. In the county that counts, Duvall said pleasantly. Sadie watched him while the men argued. Watched the confidence. The unhurried certainty. Men like Silas wore the same expression whenever they believed the room had already surrendered. And then Duvall's gaze landed on her. He paused. Not long. Just long enough. He knew something. Interesting company you're keeping, Boone, he said. Your household has grown sudden. Boone's head turned a fraction toward her, then back. My household is none of your concern. Everything under that roof is my concern if half that roof is collateral. Sadie felt Wren's fingers digging into her hand. Outside, the light had gone copper on the hills. The world held that breathless stillness that came before a summer storm, though no cloud crossed the sky. This is where I'll pause and ask you something, because by now you know these people well enough to feel the weight of it. If you had a chance to leave clean and keep your own name safe, would you still stay and fight for a child who wasn't yours? And would you trust a man who had every reason to send you away but chose not to? Duvall handed Boone the papers with a little flourish. I'll return tomorrow morning with deputies. Have the child ready. And Elias, do read the final page. There are names there you may find unexpectedly familiar. He tipped his hat and left them with his dust. Boone did not open the packet until the wagon vanished. When he did, Sadie saw the blood leave his face. "What?" Tom asked. Boone looked at Sadie. On the last page, clipped behind the lean documents, was a copy of the wanted circular bearing her husband's name. And below it, in Duvall's own hand, one line: "Deliver the woman with the ledgers, and I may prove flexible regarding the child." Night came hard after that. An hour before midnight, the lower pasture horses blew restless against their rails. Sadie heard it from her bed and was already pulling on boots when the first shot cracked through the yard. Then another. Men shouted. Wren screamed. Glass burst somewhere below. Sadie ran for the kitchen stairs and hit the landing just as Marta dragged the child behind the woodbox. Tom Keene fired from the pantry window. Outside, shadows moved between the pump and the barn. One lantern hit the dirt and rolled, spilling wild yellow light across boots and wagon spokes. "Back way," Tom shouted. "They've come for the girl." "And the woman," said a voice from the yard. Sadie knew that voice even before she reached the door. Silas Vane stepped into the lantern wash with one side of his face marked shiny white from the fire that should have killed him. His smile had not improved with survival. "There you are, sweetheart." Boone came in from the porch, shoved Sadie behind him, and drew his revolver. "You picked the wrong house." Silas laughed. "No, I picked the house hiding my property." Fear rose fast and old in Sadie. Then Wren clung to her skirt. "No more running." "The ledgers are in my bag," she said to Boone, loud enough for all of them. "Wrapped in the false bottom. They prove Vane and Duvall stole freight money, forged debt papers, and killed the clerk who found out." Silas's eyes changed. The pleasant mask fell clear away. "You lying little." He lunged. Everything broke at once. Boone fired. Tom fired. Marta shoved Wren toward the pantry. Silas grabbed Sadie by the wrist and dragged her through the shattered doorway into the yard. The bruise under her sleeve flared like fire. She twisted hard, felt skin tear, and snatched the fallen lantern with her free hand. Not at him. At the team hitched near the side gate. The horses screamed as flame licked the traces. Sadie dropped her voice, low and steady, the way she had on the station platform, the way she had with frightened creatures all her life. "Easy now. Easy. Forward." They surged exactly where she needed them, through Duvall's men, into the wagon tongue, splintering wood and scattering bodies in a crash of iron and terror. For one breathless second the whole yard became hooves, sparks, smoke, and men diving clear. Then Silas struck her across the mouth with the back of his hand. She went down tasting blood and dust. When she looked up, Wren was in Sheriff Pike's arms, and Pike was backing toward the gate with a pistol to the child's temple. "Drop it," he shouted at Boone. "Drop it, or she dies." Boone froze. The world narrowed to that one sight. The child shaking, Pike panting, Duvall coming out of the dark brushing dirt from his sleeve as if the whole thing offended his schedule. "Enough," Duvall said. "Bring me the bag, Boone, and I may yet keep this civilized." Boone's gun lowered half an inch. Sadie pushed herself up on both hands. Her lip was split. Her left wrist screamed. She looked at Elias Boone and saw exactly what he was about to do. He would trade everything. The child. The evidence. Maybe even her. Because once already, long ago, he had chosen business over blood. Jonas Boone had begged him for money the winter before, and Elias had refused to keep covering a brother he thought merely reckless. Jonas went to Duvall instead. By spring Jonas was dead, his widow gone, and Wren had nearly been handed to a wolf in a good coat. That was the guilt he carried, not what he had done, what he had failed to do in time. "Elias," Sadie said. He looked at her. "Don't pay twice for another man's sins." Pike jerked Wren hard enough to make her cry out. Boone's eyes went black with it. He dropped the revolver. And that was the cliff's edge. Because Duvall smiled and said, "Now tie him." What saved them was not luck. It was that Wren had been listening all night to the woman who calmed frightened things by telling them the truth. The child bit Pike's hand to the bone. He shouted. His gun shifted. Boone moved. One step. One blow. Pike went down. Tom hit the second deputy from the side. Marta snatched Wren and rolled behind the trough. Sadie lunged for the dropped revolver, but Silas caught her hair and hauled her back. She heard Boone shout her name. Then she drove her heel straight into Silas's burned cheek. He screamed and let go. By dawn, Duvall and Pike were under guard in Boone's tack room, and Silas Vane had fled north bleeding from the face with 2 ranch hands on his trail and nowhere left to hide. The quiet after violence felt hollow. The kitchen smelled of coffee, blood, and wet ash. Marta slept in a chair with Wren curled against her. Sadie was at the pump washing blood from her mouth when Boone came up behind her carrying her carpet bag. "The false bottom?" he asked. She nodded. He found the catch and lifted the panel. Inside lay 2 ledgers wrapped in oilcloth, corners worn soft from miles of fear. Boone did not open them yet. He set the bag down and, very carefully, touched 2 fingers under Sadie's chin so she would look at him. "I was running from my past," she said, "because there was no use hiding it now." The words came rough. "Every mile after Kansas, I told myself I was looking for safety. Truth is, I was looking for a place where being afraid wouldn't be the most important thing about me." His hand stayed where it was. Warm. Steady. "Sadie," he said, "some hearts don't open like doors. They thaw like ground in late spring. Slow, and then all at once." That was the line Wren would remember years later. The line other people would carry home. Sadie let out a laugh that broke halfway into tears. Boone pulled her into him then, gently at first, as if asking permission with his whole body. She gave it by not stepping back. He smelled of smoke, cedar soap, and the long night. "I should have sent you away," he murmured. "No," she said against his shirt. "You should have done exactly what you did. You saw me before I knew how to stand still long enough to be seen." He closed his eyes. "If this story is moving you right here, then you are exactly who it was meant for. A like and a subscribe is how you tell us to keep telling stories where tenderness survives the hard parts." They sat on the porch until the sun reached the top rail. He told her about Jonas, about pride disguised as principle, about the wife and little boy he had buried 5 winters earlier after fever took them inside the same week. "I built the big house after," he said. "Fool notion. Thought if I made the walls wide enough, grief might not touch both sides at once." Sadie laid her hand over his. "Grief is greedy," she said, "but it don't get to be the only thing living in a house." He turned his hand and held hers properly. "Stay," he said, "not as an order, not as a bargain. A plain hope, offered clean." "I will," she answered. By 10 o'clock the town hall in Red Mesa was full enough to sweat. Boone rode in with the ledgers, Sadie at his side, Wren between Marta and Tom in the second wagon, and Duvall trussed upright under guard where every eye could see him. Sheriff Pike had talked plenty once he understood Duvall would abandon him first. Silas Vane tried to slip onto the noon stage. Mr. Bell from the Mercantile recognized the burn on his face and stalled him with polite conversation until Tom's men arrived. By the time county officials came up from Trinidad, they found not rumor but proof. False liens, forged signatures, bribery accounts, freight theft, and the murdered bookkeeper entered neatly as a resolved expense. Duvall fought hardest when the room stopped fearing him. That was the real death of men like him, not the irons. The moment ordinary people looked back without lowering their eyes. He pointed at Sadie across the hall. "She's a wife who deserted her lawful husband." Sadie stood. Her lip was still split, her wrist bandaged. Her voice, when it came, held every mile she had survived. "A husband who uses fists, fire, and fear to keep a woman silent has forfeited every holy word he ever stood under." No one moved. No one laughed. Then old Reverend Pritchard said from the back, "That'll preach." The room broke into the kind of release that comes when truth finally stops asking permission. By sundown, Cal Duvall's accounts were seized, his liens voided, his contracts suspended, and his name wired to every office between Red Mesa and Denver. Sheriff Pike lost his badge in front of the same men who had once tipped their hats to him. Silas Vane went east in chains to answer for murder, fraud, and assault, shouting promises no one bothered to hear. Wren stayed where she belonged. The north pasture stayed green, and Red Mesa, being a town and therefore imperfect, corrected itself a little. Women who had watched Sadie from porches now nodded first. Men who had doubted Boone discovered that quiet was not softness after all. Weeks later, when the cottonwoods along the creek had begun to silver underneath, Sadie moved from the room above the kitchen to the east bedroom with the morning light, and Wren insisted on carrying in a chipped vase with 3 crooked wildflowers, as if furnishing happiness were serious work. In the first cold of autumn, the porch finally held a rocker worn smooth by use. Wren's laughter chased the dogs through the yard, and Elias Boone came in from the lower meadow to find Sadie standing at the rail with flour on her hands and peace on her face. He kissed her once, easy and certain, while supper burned a little in the oven and nobody in that house minded at all. She had spent half her life believing love arrived like thunder. Turned out it came more often like lamplight, steady, earned, and warm enough to build by. From the rise above Boone Ridge, the house glowed gold against the blue evening, smoke lifting straight from the chimney, while three small figures lingered on the porch, and the last light lay quiet on the pasture like a blessing. Next time, stay with us for the story of a deaf seamstress sent west in disgrace, and the half-blind rancher who was the first man to understand that what the world called broken was only another way of being brave.